Welcome to our partner training on ADA, Accommodation Fundamentals. This is a 10-minute segment on how to help your organization honor employee disability protections and minimize the associated expenses. Our agenda with this segment of partner training includes the purpose of Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, accommodations, an overview of ADA protections and reasonable accommodations, review of the employee accommodation process, and the interactive process. We have three main objectives with this module. We want to help your company comply with ADA requirements. These laws are complex and require technical expertise and coordination to be compliant. We want to minimize the impact of ADA accommodations on productivity, profitability, and the customer experience. Employee accommodations can be disruptive to productivity if not handled correctly. Careful management of each accommodation ensures that employees with disabilities can perform their duties effectively despite their limitations. We want to ensure all contributors understand their role in the process. You and EG have a role to play, and this training will define that so all contributors can support the process effectively. Under Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, a reasonable accommodation is a modification or adjustment to a job, the work environment, or the way things are usually done during the performance of job duties. These modifications enable an individual with a disability to have an equal opportunity not only to get a job, but to successfully perform their job tasks to the same extent as people without disabilities. Here are some examples of reasonable accommodations: allowing an employee to sit instead of stand, modifying the layout of a workspace, providing screen reader software, making materials available in Braille or large print, modifying a policy to allow a service animal in the business setting. It's important to remember that what is reasonable for one employer may not be reasonable for another. If making accommodations creates an undue hardship on the employer, it may not meet the definition of reasonable. What is reasonable is only determined by a court of law. Therefore, denying an employee accommodation is not usually recommended unless the employer can clearly substantiate how the accommodation would create that undue hardship. Let's review the flow of an ADA accommodation and how EG supports you. When an employee requests an accommodation related to a disability limitation, notify LOA ADA on duty at employer's guardian. The manager provides an accommodation request form to the employee, which can be found in EG Force Knowledge or provided by our LOA ADA team. EG will provide guidance on protections that may apply. EG will create an ADA accommodation case where appropriate. This is where we'll collaborate and document our efforts to manage the accommodation. Our HR partner will be provided coaching and forms to document the interactive process. EG will coordinate with your HR partner to obtain medical certifications. Accommodation cases in EG Force allow us to collaborate more effectively. They allow you to track progress easily, allows us to share related documents, allows your organization to monitor the impact of accommodations. Let's review the interactive process. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or EEOC, recommends that employers use an interactive process to determine appropriate accommodations. This simply means that the employer and employee requesting accommodation work together to produce reasonable accommodations. Using the interactive process is only required if the accommodation is not obvious. According to the EEOC, when appropriate accommodation is obvious, it's not necessary to go through the step-by-step process. For example, if an employee who uses a wheelchair requests that the desk be placed on blocks to elevate the desktop above the arms of the wheelchair, and the employer complies, an appropriate accommodation has been requested, identified, and provided without needing a formal process. When an accommodation is not obvious, an appropriate accommodation is best determined through an interactive process. As part of this process, the EEOC recommends that the employer analyze the job involved and determine its purpose and essential functions. Consult with the employee to determine exact job-related limitations imposed by the individual's disability and how those limitations could be overcome with a reasonable accommodation. Collaboratively identify potential accommodations and assess the effectiveness each would have in enabling the individual to perform the essential functions of the position. Consider the preference of the individual to be accommodated. Select and implement the most appropriate accommodation for both the employee and the employer. Monitor the effectiveness of the accommodation by following up with the employee to ensure they're comfortable. Remembering and mastering all the information in this training takes time and practice. Our knowledge base has a wealth of information, including the process and forms for managing accommodations. You can contact Employer's Guardian or refer to the appropriate article for more information when in doubt. Thank you for your participation. For assistance with this process, please contact LOA-ADA at employersguardian.com or give us a call.